y'all, it's Alex and welcome back to my channel. So it's been a hot second and I've got a new art supply in my arsenal. Sometime in the midst of quarantine, I bought these Miya Himi Gouaches that I've seen a lot of people raving about recently. And we'll get into the gouaches themselves in a second, as beautiful as they are. So yes, I've been gone for a good hot second. Mental health things did not allow me to comfortably do anything other than, just hang out, play Animal Crossing, But I'm gonna be trying to delve back into YouTube here, and what better way to do that than with an entirely new art supply. So this attempt that is filmed here is actually from a little while ago, but it was my second attempt with gouaches. My first attempt that I got on video, I didn't feel comfortable enough with gouaches at that point to post the video. I do have the piece posted, and here it is. It's a good piece and everything, but I'm still not quite sure how exactly gouaches fit into my art, Something I will preface this video with is, since gouaches felt a little weird to be doing my art style, my typical art in, I decided I wanted to try doing something that's kind of atypical for my work. I don't typically do really big landscapes with just tiny little figures in them. I've done them before, but I've never quite enjoyed them, and it's not something that's really mainstay in my art. So that could be one of two reasons why I'm still not sure how exactly I like this gouache. For reference, there's only one other time I've used gouache besides having this Miya Himi Gouache, and I kind of cheated and used acrylic paint to make it look better. So already I'm kind of off to a bit of a rocky situation with gouaches. One thing I do really like, I find that I both love and hate the medium. I love that you can re-wet it, but I also hate that it re-wets and you can't work over areas that you mess up on, even though it feels like you should be able to, like you're using an acrylic paint. Now, there are two types of gouaches out there. There's watercolor gouache, like this stuff, and acrylic gouache, which the only time I've seen acrylic gouache is with kind of like the more expensive brands. Specifically Holbein is what comes to mind when I think of acrylic gouaches. So I think for me to feel like I've tried this medium out the best I can, I will have to get my hands on some acrylic gouaches, but that's future me's problem. As far as these go, I feel like they're pretty good. I don't have much to compare them to, but they do give really good opacity. In my first attempt using these gouaches, or using this gouache, I tried doing my typical kind of blocky shading, but I found that I was having a really hard time getting crisp lines. And obviously that's because it's re-wetting whatever you were working on before, so it's trying to mix. While I was working on that, I decided whatever my next piece was going to be able to actually utilize that. And I figured what better way to do that than to paint some sort of skyline where the light is beginning to fade. And looking back on it, if I would have gone a little bit more pink, this is essentially the exact same skyline from my Painting a Rock video. But I don't really know any other way to paint skies. I've never really taken a lot of time to actually draw landscapes, so the way I draw landscapes is pretty, I follow a formula, really. One thing I do quite enjoy about these gouaches is, since you have just that big vat of gouache that's just open, you do get to pull out whatever you need to mix. And if, say, I use a little spatula to pull paint out to be able to mix it on the palette that's given with it, so that way I don't contaminate colors. If I have a little bit too much on my little palette knife thing, then I can just put it back in the vat. It'd be very difficult to do that if they were, say, tube gouaches. Of course, since they are just kind of open and the container just kind of snaps back closed, they don't seal back up. They don't stay this nice jelly consistency. However, let me go ahead and grab it out now. Between my first and second uses of this stuff, which was about a gap of about a week and a half, the gouache remained spectacularly jelly. And if I look at it now, and I can actually excuse my messy desk, we have a lot of these have actually remained pretty shiny if I go in and poke, say, this red one. It does still come away with still wet gouache. And same with, say, like, there is a little bit of a rind forming on this pink one here, but it's not hard to break through it. So if the concern you have with these is they're open containers, like this green one down here is dry enough that I can touch it and not come away with much, but it wouldn't be too hard. Like, it still squishes down a little bit. There's still, oh, I actually got a little bit on my finger now. So like, there's still going to be gouache that you can get out of them. They're not gonna be ruined. And also, you can just re-wet them anyways, so. The one thing I found to be a little tedious with them was I couldn't exactly... I felt bad about mixing large amounts of medium, so I would mix a little bit, and then I'd get to the end of it and be like, okay, what do I do now? I need to go mix the same color again, but I don't remember how much went into it, so since you can re-wet it, I'd say it's probably a dumb concern to have, but my brain was trying to save as much of this stuff as possible. For price point, and for the fact that I'd probably say these are on the lower quality end, I know, like I've said, I don't have a lot to compare to, but just based off of the packaging and also from reviews I've seen by other YouTubers and other artists, these are probably going to be good for practicing, and honestly, that's entirely why I bought these. I wanted to get a hand for exactly what goes into the medium before I go and splurge a whole bunch on ones that are actually like good enough for doing full final pieces. I have to say, like, my favorite part about them was, like, I'd mix a color that would be too light, but as I was working it into the area, like the highlights on the dunes there, I definitely mixed a little bit too much white into my base purple, but it ended up being almost exactly right once it was on the page, so. And you do have a little bit of weird opacity with this, it's almost like a quinacridone magenta sort of color, the one that I'm using on the shadows of the mountains, but, I mean, I didn't really care too much about it at that point. I also wish I wouldn't have gone in with that weird line on the edge of the mountains. I tried going for a mostly lineless form for this, so. Around this point in the illustration / painting, I started thinking that it was a little bit too much just purple and pink, and I wanted to kind of mix it up a little bit. I don't know whether or not necessarily yellow was the best of choices, especially since when I did that weird salmony pink against the dark blue of the sky, it picked up wherever I went over, so it makes this weird kind of muddy color. And I do kind of play into that. I do put some more blue tone shadows within the clouds, because I mean, just trying to make it gel together a little better. The clouds are probably my least favorite part of this piece. One redeeming factor of them is where they break the frame. It was originally part of the plan to have them break the frame. It wasn't necessarily, I think I could have sketched it out a little better. And tell me what you guys think of the darker shadowing in the clouds. I wanted to give them a little bit more depth, but this weird muddy purple, I don't like it. So, and I tried going in and putting a little bit more texture along the dunes, and you can also kind of see in the distance, in like that valley between the mountains, there's like the hints of a large city. I didn't have a small enough brush to be able to do it at the scale that I really wanted. And as always, adding the stars is one of my favorite aspects of any piece where it's nighttime. And to be able to test the opacity of the black gouache, what better test than to paint literally the entire background black? I did have to fix some spots where I went inside the lines a little bit, but I feel like it did a pretty good job. There were some parts that I did have to go over twice, because in order to get the coverage and for it to fill in the kind of toothed texture of the paper that I was using, I did have to water it down a good amount. And also, so I wouldn't put my hand in it, I did have to flip around the frame, or flip around the page a little bit. I know that's kind of like a big YouTube no-no that I've seen, like people just don't flip the canvas, but it's sometimes really important not to put your hand directly into the wet paint. For the story of this piece, while I've got a moment, the kind of teal orb down there at the edge of the water is supposed to be a wizard who is traveling across the sea, and they've hopped across these little formations of ice that they've made, and they're kind of breaking up as they move away. I will say that I did have to redo the wizard a few times. My one problem is no matter how small of a brush I used with this stuff, I didn't feel like I had the right control. Like, I'm using the smallest brush I have, and yet still all of the lines for this character were a lot larger than I planned. The legs are longer. I ended up kind of like going even further past my original plan, and I thought I was done. I set everything up, backed away from it, and then I came back and I was just really unhappy with how the wizard was looking, so I started again. I tried going over top of the little wizard guy with the gouache, but it kept picking up, so I went in with a few coats instead of my white acrylic paint. And also with that acrylic paint, I went in and added some wave texture along the edge of the water. And of course, the white acrylic paint was a little hard to cover up with the gouache, but a good few layers managed to make it look as opaque as I wanted. And I went back in instead with a couple of my Sakura Pigma Micron pens. Still not great, considering the texture of the paper made it a little difficult to make it as smooth as I wanted, but it was at least a lot better. So as this piece draws to a close, I want to say thank you for everybody who's kind of stuck with me through my multiple hiatuses. I'm going to be trying to ramp up my posting schedule as we get closer and closer to Inktober here, and I'm really excited to show you what I've been working on other than this. If you feel so inclined, hit that subscribe button and check me out on my other social media handles. Thanks, and I'll see y'all in the next one.